I never thought that at 67 years old, I'd be planning revenge. But life has a way of surprising you, just like cancer does. The words from Dr. Patel still echoed in my mind as I sat at my desk in the quiet corner of the Lakeside Public Library where I'd worked for over 40 years. Stage 2 breast cancer, Mrs. Murphy. Caught relatively early, but we'll need to start treatment soon. I'd nodded calmly, asked practical questions about survival rates and treatment options, scheduled follow-up appointments, and even drove myself home afterward. Only when I was alone in my kitchen, the same one where I'd raised Ryan after Henry died, did I allow myself 10 minutes of tears before pulling myself together. That was 3 weeks ago. Today, I was organizing the monthly book club meeting, keeping myself busy as I'd always done through life's challenges. The rhythm of placing cookies on a tray and arranging chairs in our community room felt reassuringly normal. I hadn't told many people yet, just my best friend Dot, my boss at the library who needed to know about my upcoming absences, and of course, Ryan and Alexis. I winced thinking about that conversation. I'd invited them over for Sunday dinner, prepared Ryan's favorite pot roast despite my waning appetite, and shared the news as straightforwardly as I could. Ryan had immediately come around the table to hug me, his eyes filled with the same fear I'd seen when he was a boy and his father died suddenly of a heart attack. But Alexis had stayed seated, her perfectly manicured nails tapping against her wine glass. "Are you sure it's actually cancer, Fran? My aunt thought she had breast cancer last year, but it turned out to be just a cyst. Doctors are so quick to jump to the worst conclusion these days." I remembered how Ryan had shot his wife a look, but as usual, he'd said nothing to contradict her. After 20 years of watching my son tiptoe around confrontation, I wasn't surprised. Henry had been the same way, a peacekeeper to a fault. "Yes, Alexis, they're quite sure. They did a biopsy," I'd replied, keeping my voice steady. I'd spent decades managing difficult patrons and school board members who wanted to ban books. I could certainly handle my dismissive daughter-in-law. "Well, at least breast cancer is the good kind of cancer to get, right? Everyone knows someone who's had it. My yoga instructor had it, and she didn't even need chemo." That was Alexis, always minimizing my experiences, always making sure I understood my place in her world. At the bottom, the library door chimed, pulling me from my thoughts. Dot appeared, her silver hair styled in its usual practical bob, carrying 2 coffee cups from the cafe across the street. "You're an angel," I said, accepting the cup gratefully. "How are you holding up today?" Dot asked, her eyes taking in my appearance with the careful assessment of someone who'd known me for 30 years. "I'm fine, just thinking about yesterday." "Sunday dinner with the Ice Queen?" Dot had never pretended to like Alexis, a honesty I appreciated. She outdid herself this time. When I mentioned I might need some help with driving to appointments after surgery, she immediately started talking about how they're just too busy with her business expansion. Then she suggested I should look into senior transportation services since I'd need to get used to depending on strangers eventually anyway. Dot's face darkened. That woman. I don't understand how Ryan doesn't see it. He sees it. He just doesn't know what to do about it, I said, defending my son automatically. "Anyway, I've been thinking about something else." I lowered my voice even though the library was nearly empty. "You know the money I loaned them for their house down payment? The agreement specified repayment in full if requested." Dot's eyebrows rose. She'd helped me draft that agreement, insisting on proper legal documentation even when Ryan had been hurt by my lack of trust. "And the investment in Alexis's marketing agency? The one Ryan doesn't even know about because you wanted to surprise them with your support?" I nodded. "Exactly. I've been too nice for too long, Dot. I've spent my life being reasonable, being helpful, turning the other cheek. But facing mortality has a way of clarifying things." "What are you thinking, Fran?" Dot leaned forward, curiosity sparking in her eyes. "I'm thinking it's time Alexis learned that even quiet library ladies have limits." For the first time since my diagnosis, I felt a surge of energy replacing the creeping fatigue. I'd watched for 8 years as Alexis slowly isolated Ryan from me, making comments about my quaint career and modest home, scheduling family events knowing I couldn't attend, forgetting to pass along messages. I'd stayed quiet through it all, telling myself that keeping peace was worth swallowing my pride. But cancer had changed the equation. I didn't have unlimited time anymore to hope things would improve naturally. and I was tired of being treated like an inconvenience by someone who had benefited from my generosity without ever knowing it. You should have heard her, Dot. When I told them about the diagnosis, do you know what she said later when Ryan left the room to take a phone call? She looked me straight in the eye and said, "Try not to dump all this cancer stuff on Ryan too much. He's under a lot of pressure at work, and honestly, he gets so emotional about you already. Some things you should just handle yourself." As if I was planning to use cancer to inconvenience them. Dot reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "What are you going to do?" "I'm calling in the loan. All of it. And I'm pulling my investment from her business right before their expansion. That's nearly $300,000 combined. They'll have to scramble." "Exactly. And there's more. The Chamber of Commerce Gala is next month. Alexis is receiving that entrepreneurship award she hasn't stopped talking about for weeks. Linda Hawkins asked me yesterday if I'd present the Community Service Award since I've been on the library board for so long." "Perfect timing," Dot said, a slow smile spreading across her face. "I think it's time the community sees the real Alexis Murphy. But I need your help." Over the next hour, as we prepared for the book club, we outlined the plan. It wasn't vicious or illegal. I'd spent too many years believing in justice and fairness to cross those lines. But it would be effective. By the time we finished talking, I felt something I hadn't expected. A sense of control returning to my life when so much had been taken from me by my diagnosis. The next morning, I called Thomas at the bank to begin the process. As I'd expected, he was concerned. "Fran, are you sure about this? Calling in a loan from family is always complicated." "I'm quite sure, Thomas. I've recently received some unexpected news about my health, and I need to consolidate my resources." I could hear him shuffling papers. "Well, everything is in order legally. The terms are clear. They'll have 30 days to repay in full." "Thank you. And I'd like to make another change. The investment account for Murphy Digital Marketing, I'd like to withdraw those funds as well." There was a pause. "Fran, that could cause some difficulties for the business. The paperwork you signed indicated it was a 2-year commitment minimum, and it's only been 14 months. Check Clause 8B, Thomas. There's a health emergency provision." I had insisted on that clause, remembering how quickly Henry's death had created financial chaos. After a moment, he sighed. "You're right. It's there. I'll start the paperwork today. I appreciate your discretion in this matter. Ryan doesn't know about my investment in Alexis's business. It was meant to be a surprise once it had grown. Of course, everything will be handled according to your instructions." I hung up feeling strangely calm. The plan was in motion. That afternoon, my cell phone rang while I was helping a young mother find picture books about new siblings. Ryan's name flashed on the screen, but I let it go to voicemail, finishing with the patron first. When I checked the message, his voice was tense. "Mom, we just got a letter from Lakeside Bank about the house loan. Can you call me as soon as possible? There must be some mistake." I waited until after my shift, sitting in my car in the library parking lot before returning his call. "Ryan, I got your message." "Mom, what's going on?" "We got official notice that you're calling in the entire loan for the house. There must be some mistake." I took a deep breath. "It's not a mistake, Ryan. I need those funds back now." "But why? We've been making the payments on time every month." "I know. This isn't about your payments. I need to consolidate my finances because of my medical situation." There was a long pause. "Is it that serious? The cancer? You told us it was caught early." I felt a twinge of guilt, but pushed past it. "It's serious enough that I need to make sure my finances are in order." "Ryan, the agreement was clear from the beginning. I have the right to call in the loan with 30 days' notice." "I know, but Mom, this is really bad timing. Alexis's business is expanding. We've already committed to renovations on the house. I don't know if we can pull together that much cash so quickly." "I'm sorry about the timing," I said, not entirely truthfully. "But my health has to be my priority right now." When he spoke again, his voice was smaller, reminding me of the little boy who'd needed me so much after his father died. "Of course. I understand. We'll figure something out." The guilt twisted sharper, but I reminded myself of all the Sunday dinners where Alexis had belittled my career, my home, my clothes, and now my cancer. I thought of Ryan's pained expression every time it happened, and how he never, ever defended me. "I'm sure you will. I need to go now. I have an appointment with Dr. Patel to discuss treatment options. Do you want me to come with you? No, thank you. Dot is driving me. Another lie. The appointment wasn't until next week, but I couldn't bear to hear him offer and then retract once Alexis inevitably objected. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of medical appointments and quiet preparation. I worked my regular shifts at the library, finding comfort in the familiar rhythms and the genuine concern from colleagues and regular patrons who noticed something was wrong despite my efforts to appear normal. Ryan called daily, his voice increasingly stressed as he and Alexis scrambled to manage the financial crisis I'd created. I felt terrible about causing him worry, but reminded myself this was as much for him as for me. He needed to see Alexis under pressure, see how she reacted when things weren't going her way. I didn't have to wait long. On Saturday, they appeared at my door unannounced. Ryan looked exhausted, but Alexis was vibrating with barely controlled fury. "We need to talk," she said, pushing past me into the living room, where she'd always made comments about my outdated furniture. "Hello to you too, Alexis," I said mildly, closing the door behind them. Ryan gave me an apologetic look. "Mom, we've been trying to figure out how to repay the loan so suddenly, and it's creating some challenges." Alexis didn't wait for him to finish. "What is this really about, Fran? Is this some kind of power play because you're sick? Because I have to tell you, it's not going to get you more attention from Ryan. He has his own family to worry about." I sat down in my favorite armchair, the one Henry had given me for our 10th anniversary, and looked at her calmly. "This isn't about attention, Alexis. It's about putting my affairs in order." "Bull. You've never cared about money before. You've worked in a library your whole life when you could have had a real career." Ryan flinched. "Alexis, don't." She turned on him. "Don't what? Tiptoe around her feelings while she's destroying everything we've worked for? Do you know what this means for the business expansion? For the house renovations?" I watched as my son seemed to shrink before my eyes, his shoulders hunching forward in that familiar posture of avoidance. My heart ached for him even as I reminded myself why this was necessary. "The loan agreement was clear," I said quietly, "and I'm sorry for any inconvenience, but my health has to come first now." "Your health," Alexis sneered. "A little early-stage breast cancer, and suddenly you're holding it over everyone's head. Do you know how common breast cancer is? My yoga instructor went through it and never missed a class." Ryan's head snapped up. "Alexis, that's enough!" I felt a strange calm descend over me. "Actually, Ryan, let her continue. I'd like to hear exactly how Alexis feels about my cancer diagnosis." Alexis glared at me, years of barely concealed contempt finally breaking through. "I think you're milking it. I think you've always played the martyr. Poor Fran, widowed young, sacrificed everything for her son. And now you've got cancer as your latest prop. Well, guess what? Everyone has problems. The difference is some of us don't use them to manipulate people." The room fell silent. Ryan was staring at his wife with an expression I'd never seen before, as if seeing her clearly for the first time. "Is that really what you think of my mother?" he asked quietly. "The woman who put me through college working 2 jobs? Who's helped us financially more times than I can count?" Alexis seemed to realize she'd gone too far. She backpedaled quickly. "I'm just frustrated about the loan, Ryan. You know I respect your mother." But the damage was done. I could see it in Ryan's eyes, a crack in the perfect image of his wife, a glimpse of her true nature that he couldn't unsee. "I think you both should go," I said, standing up. "This conversation isn't productive. The loan terms stand. You have 30 days. After they left, I sat in the quiet of my living room for a long time, wondering if I'd done the right thing. Was I being vindictive? Was using my cancer as leverage any better than what I accused Alexis of doing? But then I remembered the dismissive tone when she'd talked about my diagnosis, the years of small cruelties, the way she'd systematically tried to diminish me in my son's eyes. No, this wasn't just petty revenge. This was about standing up for myself when I'd spent a lifetime putting others first. And maybe, just maybe, it was about saving my son from a marriage that brought out the worst in both of them. The final part of my plan was approaching quickly. The Chamber of Commerce Gala was just a week away, and I had an appointment with Linda Hawkins to discuss my role in the ceremony. What Alexis didn't know, what nobody knew except Dot and soon Linda, was that I'd been gathering evidence. Text messages Alexis had sent to mutual acquaintances, mocking my little library job, the time she'd excluded me from Ryan's surprise birthday party, and most recently her comments about my cancer being an inconvenience and a bid for attention. Soon, the careful facade Alexis had built in our community would crumble, just as my quiet compliance had. Cancer had taken much from me, but it had given me one precious gift: the clarity to see what really mattered and the courage to finally stand up for it. The Chamber of Commerce Gala was being held at the Lakeside Grand Hotel, the fanciest venue in our modest suburb. As I stood in my bedroom getting ready, I caught my reflection in the mirror and paused. My hair was still there. For now. Dr. Patel had explained that chemotherapy would begin after my surgery, scheduled for next week. I ran my fingers through the silver-streaked brown hair I'd worn in the same practical bob for decades. Soon it would be gone, one more loss in a season defined by them. I pushed the thought away and focused on my appearance. I'd splurged on a new dress for the occasion, navy blue with a subtle shimmer, conservative but elegant. Dot had insisted on taking me shopping, declaring that if I was going to drop a bomb on Alexis's perfect world, I should at least look fabulous doing it. The plan had evolved over the past week. Initially, I'd imagined a public confrontation, exposing Alexis's cruelty to everyone at once. But that wasn't really my style, and as Dot had wisely pointed out, it might make me look vindictive rather than truthful. Instead, we'd developed something more subtle but potentially more devastating. My phone chimed with a text from Dot. Carriage awaits Cinderella. Operation Karma begins in T-minus 45 minutes. Despite my nerves, I smiled. Dot's flair for the dramatic had been a bright spot in this difficult time. I took one last look in the mirror, picked up my small clutch containing the items I'd need tonight, and headed downstairs. Dot whistled when I opened the door. "Look at you. Alexis won't know what hit her. Is it too much?" I smoothed the dress nervously. "It's perfect, elegant, appropriate, and a complete departure from the cardigans she's always mocking you for wearing." Dot handed me into her car with exaggerated formality. "Your chariot, madam." The drive to the hotel was short, but it gave me time to run through the plan once more. Linda Hawkins, the chamber president, had been surprisingly receptive when I'd approached her with my request to make a special announcement during the ceremony. Linda had never been particularly fond of Alexis, whose aggressive self-promotion had rubbed many community leaders the wrong way over the years. "Just to be clear," I said to Dot as we pulled into the hotel parking lot, "you have the envelope?" Dot patted her handbag. "Safe and sound. Thomas delivered the documents yesterday. The official notice of investment withdrawal for Murphy Digital Marketing, effective immediately, and the bank statement showing exactly how much you've contributed to their success story over the years." I nodded, a flutter of anxiety in my stomach. "And you're sure Ryan won't be too hurt by this?" "That's my only concern." Dot's expression softened. "Fran, you've been protecting that boy his entire life. Maybe it's time he faced some hard truths about his wife, and about how he's allowed her to treat you." She was right, of course. My desire to shield Ryan from pain had enabled Alexis's behavior for years. Still, he was my only child, and the thought of hurting him, even to open his eyes, made my heart ache. The hotel lobby was crowded with the town's business owners, local politicians, and community leaders, all in their finest attire. I spotted Ryan and Alexis immediately, he in a dark suit that needed tailoring, she in a striking red dress that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. They were standing with a group that included the mayor and several prominent business owners, Alexis at the center, gesturing animatedly as she spoke. "Showtime," Dot murmured as we approached the check-in table. I collected my name tag and program, noting with satisfaction that everything was as Linda had promised. My name was listed as the presenter for the Community Impact Award, scheduled right after Alexis's Entrepreneur of the Year acceptance speech. Ryan spotted us and broke away from the group, coming over with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Mom, you look beautiful." He hugged me carefully, as if I might break. Since the diagnosis, he'd been treating me with a new fragility that I found both touching and irritating. "Thank you, sweetheart. You're very handsome yourself." I straightened his slightly crooked tie, a maternal gesture I'd performed countless times over the years. "I didn't know you were presenting an award tonight," he said, glancing at my program. Last-minute change. The original presenter had a conflict. The lie came easily, justified by the greater truth I was about to reveal. Alexis appeared at Ryan's side, her smile tight as she took in my appearance. "Fran, what a surprise to see you here. I thought these events would be too stimulating given your condition." The subtle dig was classic Alexis, expressing false concern while implying weakness on my part. I'd learned to recognize her tactics years ago, but tonight they didn't sting as they usually did. Tonight I held all the cards. "I wouldn't miss it, Alexis, especially not your big moment." I smiled pleasantly. "Congratulations on the award. The whole town is talking about your accomplishments." Something in my tone must have alerted her because her eyes narrowed slightly. "Yes, well, it's been a lot of hard work. Building something from nothing always is." From nothing. The irony was almost too perfect. Dinner passed in a blur of small talk and mediocre chicken. I was seated at a table with Dot, Linda, and several library board members, while Ryan and Alexis were at the VIP table near the stage. Throughout the meal, I could feel Alexis watching me, perhaps sensing that something was off, but unable to identify what. After dessert, Linda approached the podium to begin the award ceremony. The first few presentations were routine: recognition for business longevity, community service, innovative practices. Then came the moment Alexis had been anticipating for weeks. "Our Entrepreneur of the Year award goes to someone who has built a thriving digital marketing agency right here in our community," Linda announced. "Please join me in congratulating Alexis Murphy of Murphy Digital Marketing." The applause was enthusiastic as Alexis made her way to the stage, her red dress catching the light dramatically. She accepted the crystal trophy with practiced grace and stepped to the microphone. "Thank you so much for this incredible honor," she began, her voice carrying that professional warmth she reserved for networking events and client meetings. "When I started Murphy Digital Marketing 5 years ago, it was just me with a laptop at my kitchen table. Today, we employ 15 people and serve clients across 3 states." I listened as she spun her tale of entrepreneurial grit and personal sacrifice, knowing that the reality was quite different. Yes, she'd worked hard, I wouldn't take that away from her, but the critical early funding that had transformed her one-woman operation into a legitimate agency had come from my retirement savings, invested quietly and without recognition. "Success isn't handed to you," she continued, oblivious to the irony. "It comes from taking risks, believing in yourself when no one else does, and making tough decisions even when they're unpopular." My hand tightened around my clutch. The tough decisions she referred to included firing a single mother during the holidays, to streamline operations, and consistently underpaying her junior staff while spending lavishly on office decor to impress clients. "I want to thank my husband, Ryan, for his unwavering support," she said, gesturing toward him. "And of course, my amazing team, without whom none of this would be possible." Not a word about family support beyond Ryan, though my $150,000 investment had paid for the office space she was now so proud of. It wasn't that I wanted public acknowledgement. The investment had been made in private, intended as a show of goodwill. But her complete erasure of any help she'd received while portraying herself as entirely self-made felt like one more deliberate slight. Alexis concluded to warm applause, her smile triumphant as she returned to her seat clutching the trophy. Linda returned to the podium, her expression giving nothing away as she moved to the next item on the agenda. Our Community Impact Award recognizes individuals who have made an extraordinary difference in Lakeside through their dedication and service. This year's recipient has been a pillar of our community for over 40 years. To present the award, please welcome Frances Murphy, our beloved head librarian. My heart pounded as I made my way to the stage, feeling Alexis's eyes on me with each step. Dot gave me a subtle thumbs up from our table, the envelope now resting on my empty chair, ready for the next phase of our plan. I took my place at the podium, surveying the room filled with familiar faces. People whose children I'd helped with homework, whose reading groups I'd facilitated, whose research questions I'd answered over decades of service. Thank you, Linda. It's an honor to be here tonight, surrounded by so many people who make Lakeside special. My voice was steady, betraying nothing of the tumult within. Before I present this award, I hope you'll indulge me for a few minutes. Recent events in my life have given me a new perspective I'd like to share. A curious hush fell over the room. This wasn't in the program, but no one seemed inclined to stop the well-respected librarian from speaking her mind. 3 weeks ago, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. A ripple of sympathetic murmurs moved through the audience. It's still early, and my prognosis is good, but facing mortality has a way of clarifying what truly matters. It shows you who stands with you when things get difficult, and sometimes who doesn't. I could see Ryan shifting uncomfortably in his seat, while Alexis maintained her pleasant public expression, though her knuckles were white around her award. I've spent my life trying to be useful, to my community, to my family, to the library patrons who trust me to connect them with knowledge. I've believed in quiet generosity, in helping without expectation of recognition or reward. But I've learned recently that sometimes silence enables behavior that shouldn't be tolerated. The room was completely still now, everyone sensing that this had become something more than a typical awards presentation. This town has given me so much: friendship, purpose, a place to raise my son after losing my husband young. In return, I've tried to give back, not just through my work at the library, but through financial support for local businesses and community initiatives. I made eye contact with Alexis briefly, noting the flicker of unease crossing her face. One such business was Murphy Digital Marketing. A visible jolt went through Alexis, her perfect composure cracking for the first time. Ryan looked confused, glancing between his wife and me. 5 years ago, I invested $150,000 of my retirement savings to help my daughter-in-law launch her business, asking only that the investment remain private. I wanted to support her dream and improve our relationship, which had always been challenging. Whispers rippled through the audience. Alexis's face had drained of color, her expression a mixture of shock and growing horror. That investment paid for the office space, the initial staff hires, and the technology that transformed a kitchen table operation into the agency being celebrated tonight. I've never sought recognition for this, until now. I paused, making sure my next words would land with the impact they deserved. Yesterday, I formally withdrew that investment, as is my right under our agreement. I've also called due a substantial loan made to my son and daughter-in-law for their home purchase. In total, approximately $300,000 that they now need to return within 30 days. The shocked silence was profound. Ryan was staring at me with disbelief, while Alexis looked as though she might be sick. I'm not doing this out of spite, though some might interpret it that way. I'm doing it because when I shared my cancer diagnosis with my family, my daughter-in-law made it abundantly clear that she considered my illness an inconvenience and an attention-seeking ploy. Gasps and murmurs spread through the room. In our small community where I was widely respected, this revelation was explosive. She told me that breast cancer is the good kind to get, that everyone has it these days, and suggested I was exaggerating my condition. When I mentioned needing help with transportation to medical appointments, she suggested I look into services for seniors since I'd need to get used to depending on strangers eventually anyway. I could see people at nearby tables turning to look at Alexis with expressions ranging from shock to disgust. Her carefully cultivated image as a community-minded businesswoman was unraveling with each word I spoke. I've spent my life avoiding confrontation, choosing peace over truth. Cancer has taught me that life is too short for such compromises. So tonight, I'm reclaiming not just my investment, but my voice. I turned slightly to address the portion of the room where Ryan and Alexis sat. Ryan, I love you more than anything in this world, but I won't be diminished or dismissed any longer, not even to keep peace in the family. And Alexis, I met her furious gaze directly. Success built on deception and cruelty isn't success at all. It's just an illusion waiting to shatter. I turned back to the wider audience, many of whom were watching with a mixture of shock and admiration. The funds I've reclaimed will be used to establish a new support program at Lakeside Library for cancer patients and their families, particularly those facing financial hardship during treatment. Sometimes, the greatest challenges reveal our most important purpose. I took a deep breath, ready to conclude what had become not just a revelation, but a reclamation of my dignity. Now, to the actual purpose of my being here tonight, The Community Impact Award goes to someone who exemplifies the spirit of service that makes our town special. Someone who gives without expecting recognition, who lifts others up instead of tearing them down. This year's recipient is Dr. Evelyn Patel, whose free clinic has provided care to hundreds of uninsured residents. The applause was tentative at first, then grew stronger as people processed what they'd witnessed. Dr. Patel approached the stage looking somewhat bewildered by the charged atmosphere, but I greeted her warmly and handed over the award, completing the official purpose of my presentation. As I returned to my seat, the room was buzzing with conversation. Dot squeezed my hand under the table, her expression a mixture of pride and concern. "You did it," she whispered. "How do you feel?" I considered the question carefully. The adrenaline was fading, leaving me suddenly aware of the weight of what I'd done. Ryan was now engaged in what appeared to be an intense, whispered argument with Alexis. Other attendees were watching them surreptitiously while pretending to focus on the remaining program. "I feel free," I finally answered. It was true. Whatever came next, the fallout with Ryan, the community gossip, the challenges of cancer treatment, I had reclaimed something essential that had been slowly eroded over years of small surrenders and silent suffering. I hadn't just exposed Alexis tonight. I had rediscovered my own voice, one that cancer might eventually take from me, but that would never again be silenced by fear or the desire to keep peace at all costs. As the evening wound down and people began to leave, many stopped by my table to offer quiet words of support or gentle touches on my shoulder. The community I'd served for decades was rallying around me, their response confirming what I'd hoped, that truth, even when difficult, was ultimately recognized and respected. Ryan and Alexis left without speaking to me, slipping out a side door while Linda was making her closing remarks. I felt a pang watching my son go, but reminded myself that this breach, however painful, was necessary. Some wounds needed to be opened fully before they could properly heal. "Ready to go home, warrior?" Dot asked, as the event officially concluded. I nodded, suddenly exhausted. The confrontation, the public speaking, the emotional weight of it all had drained what little energy my pre-treatment body could muster. "Yes, I think I've done enough damage for one evening." "Not damage," Dot corrected firmly as she helped me with my coat. "Repair. You finally started to fix what's been broken for years." As we walked through the hotel lobby, I caught sight of my reflection in a decorative mirror, back straight, head high, eyes clear. I looked like myself again, not the diminished version I'd allowed myself to become in Alexis's presence. Tomorrow would bring consequences and complications. Ryan would have questions. Alexis would be furious. The financial realities I'd set in motion would create genuine challenges for them. But tonight, for the first time since my diagnosis, I felt something unexpected breaking through the fear and uncertainty. Hope. The morning after the gala, I woke to sunshine streaming through my bedroom curtains and the distant sound of a lawnmower. For a moment, it felt like any other Saturday in my quiet suburban life. Then the memories of the previous night came flooding back. The shocked faces, Alexis's pallor, Ryan's confused hurt, and the weight of my public declaration. I reached for my phone on the nightstand, not surprised to find it filled with notifications. 3 missed calls from Ryan, none from Alexis. A dozen text messages from friends who'd been at the gala, several voicemails. I set it down without responding to any of them. There would be time for that later. My body felt heavy with fatigue as I made my way downstairs. The oncologist had warned me that even before treatment began, cancer itself could cause profound exhaustion. Or perhaps it was the emotional toll of last night's confrontation. Either way, I moved slowly, each step deliberate as I prepared my morning tea. The doorbell rang just as the kettle began to whistle. Through the peephole, I saw Ryan standing on my porch, his posture tense, his normally neat hair disheveled, as if he'd been running his hands through it repeatedly, a nervous habit from childhood. I opened the door, bracing myself. "Good morning, Ryan." He didn't return the greeting. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside, noticing the shadows under his eyes. He hadn't slept. Neither had I, really, drifting in and out of consciousness as my mind replayed the events at the gala on an endless loop. Ryan paced the length of my living room while I poured tea for both of us, a domestic ritual that felt incongruously normal given the circumstances. When I returned with the mugs, he had stopped by the mantel, staring at the family photos displayed there. Ryan's graduation, his wedding day, the three of us at Christmas last year. Moments of apparent familial harmony preserved behind glass. "Why didn't you tell me about the investment in Alexis's business?" He finally turned to face me, his expression a complex mixture of betrayal and confusion. I set the mugs down on the coffee table and lowered myself carefully into my armchair. I wanted it to be a positive thing between Alexis and me. I thought if I helped her succeed, maybe she'd see me differently. "And the loan for our house? You never indicated there was any urgency to repay it." "There wasn't, until recently." I met his gaze steadily. "Until I got sick and saw clearly how little regard Alexis has for me." Ryan ran his hand through his hair again, confirming my earlier observation. "What she said about your diagnosis was wrong. I've told her that. But publicly humiliating her? Withdrawing the business investment without warning? Demanding the house loan repayment in 30 days? Mom, you've put us in an impossible financial position." The hurt in his voice cut deep, but I held firm. "I'm sorry that you're caught in the middle, Ryan. I truly am. But Alexis has been belittling me for years, and you've never once stood up for me. That's not fair, isn't it? Last Thanksgiving, when she mocked my quaint little library job in front of everyone, what did you say? Nothing. When she scheduled your birthday dinner at a time she knew conflicted with my library board meeting, forcing me to choose between missing your celebration or letting down my colleagues, what did you say? Nothing. And when she dismissed my cancer as an inconvenience to your schedules, what did you say then?" Ryan's shoulders slumped. I told her later that it was insensitive. Later, in private, where no one could hear, least of all me. I softened my tone, seeing the genuine distress on my son's face. "I know you love her, Ryan, and I know confrontation is difficult for you. It always has been, even as a child. But your silence has enabled her behavior for years." He sank onto the couch, cradling the mug of cooling tea. "Alexis is complicated. She didn't have the kind of supportive family you gave me. Her parents were cold, demanding. She's had to fight for everything." It was an explanation I'd heard before, one that Ryan had been offering for years to excuse his wife's sharp edges and lack of empathy. There might be truth to it, but it had long since ceased to be sufficient justification. "We all have our burdens, Ryan. They explain our behavior, they don't excuse it. She's devastated, you know. Not just financially, but professionally. People are canceling contracts with the agency. 3 clients pulled out this morning alone. Her reputation in the business community is in tatters." I felt a twinge of guilt, quickly suppressed by the memory of Alexis's dismissive words about my cancer. I didn't set out to destroy her business, only to reclaim what was rightfully mine. What happens next is a consequence of her own actions and words. Ryan stared into his untouched tea. "The bank called yesterday after the gala. If we can't repay the house loan in 30 days, they'll start foreclosure proceedings." The words landed like stones. I'd known the financial impact would be severe, but hearing it stated so plainly brought the reality into sharp focus. "I'm sorry it's come to this, Ryan. I truly am. Are you?" He looked up, his eyes red-rimmed. "Because from where I'm sitting, it seems like you calculated exactly how to cause maximum damage." There was truth in that, too. I had chosen the timing and method of my revelation carefully, guided by hurt and a desire for justice that perhaps had veered into vengeance. "I won't apologize for standing up for myself after years of mistreatment," I said quietly. "But I never wanted to hurt you. Yet, here we are." Ryan set down his mug and stood. "I have to go. Alexis and I are meeting with financial advisors to figure out our options. What's left of them anyway." He moved toward the door, then paused, his back to me. "Mom, I love you, and I know Alexis has been harsh, even cruel at times. But this, I don't know how to process this. I don't know where we go from here." After he left, I sat motionless in my chair, the house silent around me. Had I gone too far? The question echoed in my mind as I gathered the untouched mugs and carried them to the kitchen. My phone rang, Dot checking in, as I'd expected she would. Her voice was cautious when I answered, testing my emotional waters. How are you holding up, warrior? Ryan just left. He's devastated. I leaned against the kitchen counter, suddenly exhausted again. He says they might lose the house. Dot's sigh carried through the line. That's rough. But Fran, remember why you did this. Remember what Alexis said about your cancer. I remember. But seeing Ryan so hurt makes me question everything. Listen to me. Dot's voice took on the firm tone she used when she thought I was being too soft. You had every right to reclaim your investment and call in that loan. Every legal right, and every moral right after the way Alexis has treated you. If they lose the house, that's on them for not having a backup plan, for spending beyond their means, for counting on your generosity as an entitlement rather than the gift it was. Her words steadied me, reminding me of the righteous anger that had fueled my actions. You're right. I know you're right. But it doesn't make this any easier. Nothing about standing up for yourself is easy, especially not for someone who spent a lifetime putting others first. But you're doing it anyway, and I'm proud of you. After we hung up, I tried to occupy myself with normal Saturday activities. Laundry, grocery shopping, sorting through the mail. But my mind kept returning to Ryan, to the house he might lose, to the business Alexis had built partly with my help, and might now watch crumble. By late afternoon, the physical and emotional toll caught up with me. I lay down for what I intended to be a short nap, and woke disoriented hours later to a darkened house and the sound of my phone ringing again. It was Dr. Patel, calling with final instructions for my surgery scheduled for Monday morning. Her voice was warm and reassuring as she reviewed what to expect, reminding me not to eat or drink after midnight and to arrive at the hospital by 6 a.m. And Fran, she added before ending the call, I heard about what happened at the gala. Word travels fast in this town. For what it's worth, I think you did the right thing. I've seen too many patients diminish themselves to keep peace with family members who don't deserve it. Her words were a balm, coming from someone who understood the particular vulnerability of a cancer diagnosis. Thank you, Dr. Patel. That means a lot. Sunday passed quietly. I prepared my house for my post-surgery return, stocking the refrigerator with easy meals, putting fresh sheets on the bed, arranging my medications on the nightstand. Dot called to confirm she would drive me to the hospital in the morning and stay until I was out of surgery. No word from Ryan or Alexis. I tried not to let that hurt settle too deeply. Monday arrived with a soft rain that matched my subdued mood. Dot appeared at my door at 5:30 a.m., thermos of tea in hand, her usual vibrant personality tempered by the solemnity of the occasion. Ready for this? She asked as we pulled out of my driveway. I wasn't sure if she meant the surgery or the aftermath of my public stand against Alexis, but the answer was the same either way. As ready as I can be. The hospital was quiet at that early hour, the check-in process efficient and impersonal. Forms to sign, insurance cards to present, medical history to confirm. The nurse who took my vitals made small talk about the weather and asked if I had family coming to wait during the procedure. My friend is here, I said, indicating Dot in the waiting area. My son couldn't make it. The nurse's expression didn't change, but I saw the flicker of judgment in her eyes. What kind of son doesn't show up for his mother's cancer surgery? The kind whose wife has convinced him his mother is manipulative and attention-seeking? I wanted to explain. The kind who's currently facing financial ruin because of my actions. But I said nothing, allowing the nurse her silent assessment. In the pre-op area, I changed into the hospital gown, removed my jewelry, and lay back on the narrow bed while various medical professionals came and went. An anesthesiologist explaining the sedation process, Dr. Patel marking the surgical site with a purple marker, a surgical resident introducing himself with a confidence that seemed mismatched with his youthful appearance. Through it all, a strange calm had settled over me. Whatever happened from here, with the surgery, with Ryan and Alexis, with the community fallout from my revelations, I had taken back control in a fundamental way. I had refused to be silenced or diminished, even as cancer threatened to take so much from me. As the orderly came to wheel me to the operating room, I closed my eyes and thought of Henry. My late husband had always believed in my strength, even when I doubted it myself. "You're tougher than you think, Franny," he used to say. Today, I hoped he was right. The operating room was bright and cold, the surgical team efficient as they transferred me to the table and secured monitoring equipment. Dr. Patel's eyes above her mask were kind as she squeezed my hand briefly. The anesthesiologist placed a mask over my face, instructing me to count backward from 10. I made it to 7 before darkness claimed me. I woke disoriented in the recovery room, the ceiling tiles swimming above me, a persistent beeping nearby. My chest felt tight and sore, but the pain was dull, muted by whatever medications flowed through the IV in my arm. A nurse appeared in my field of vision, checking monitors and adjusting something beside the bed. "Welcome back, Mrs. Murphy. Surgery went well. Dr. Patel will be by to speak with you once you're more alert." I tried to respond, but my throat was dry, the words sticking like sand. The nurse offered ice chips, which I accepted gratefully, the small cold slivers providing blessed relief. Time stretched and compressed in the recovery room, minutes feeling like hours, and then suddenly, hours having passed in what felt like moments. Eventually, they moved me to a regular room where Dot was waiting, her normally animated face solemn with concern. "Hey there, trooper," she said, approaching the bed cautiously. "How are you feeling?" "Like someone cut part of my breast off," I replied, the dark humor a defense against the reality of what had happened to my body. Dot's smile was sad, but appreciative of my attempt at levity. Always the comedian. Dr. Patel said everything went well. Clean margins. They're sending tissue to pathology, but she's optimistic. I nodded, too tired for more conversation. Dot seemed to understand, settling into the chair beside my bed with a book, her presence comforting without demanding anything from me. Late afternoon sunlight was slanting through the window blinds when I woke again, more clear-headed this time. Dot was still there, now typing on her phone. She looked up when I stirred. Sleeping Beauty awakens. Again. I managed a weak smile. "Any word from Ryan?" Dot's expression tightened slightly. "No, honey. Nothing yet." The disappointment was sharp, but not surprising. Ryan had always avoided conflict and difficult emotions, a trait he'd inherited from his father. Henry had been the same way, retreating into silence when faced with painful situations. I'd learned to navigate around that tendency during my marriage, but with Ryan, it felt different, more hurtful. "Your phone has been buzzing, though," Dot continued, trying to shift the focus. "Linda Hawkins called twice. So did Thomas from the bank, and about half the library staff, from what I can tell. Word got out about your surgery date." "I should call them back," I said, though the thought of conversation exhausted me. "Later. Right now, you rest." Dot stood and adjusted my pillows with unnecessary fussiness, a sign of her concern. "Dr. Patel said they'll keep you overnight for observation, but you should be able to go home tomorrow if all looks good." I nodded, my eyelids already growing heavy again. The combination of anesthesia, pain medication, and emotional exhaustion was powerful. As I drifted back toward sleep, I thought I heard the door to my room open, but couldn't summon the energy to check who had entered. The next time I woke, it was dark outside, the room dimly lit by a single light near the door. Dot was gone, probably sent home by the nursing staff once visiting hours ended. But someone was sitting in the chair she had occupied, a figure I recognized even in the low light. "Ryan?" He leaned forward, his face coming into clearer view. He looked terrible, unshaven, eyes bloodshot, his normally neat appearance disheveled. "Hey, Mom, how are you feeling?" "I've been better," I admitted, struggling to sit up slightly. "What time is it?" "Around midnight. I convinced the night nurse to bend the rules." He attempted a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Turns out, my mother just had cancer surgery," is a pretty effective argument. I studied his face, trying to gauge his emotional state. "I'm glad you came." I almost didn't. His honesty was painful but not unexpected. "I'm still trying to process everything. The money, the public revelation, all of it. But when Dot called and said you were out of surgery," he trailed off, rubbing his face with both hands. "I couldn't stay away, no matter how confused and angry I still am." "I understand," I said softly. And I did. The complexity of emotions between us now couldn't be resolved in one midnight hospital visit. "Alexis doesn't know I'm here." The words hung between us, heavy with implication. His marriage was in crisis, financial, emotional, perhaps irreparable, and I had been the catalyst for better or worse. "We had to put our house on the market today," he continued, his voice flat. At a reduced price for a quick sale. The business is hemorrhaging clients. Alexis had to lay off 3 employees this afternoon. Each statement landed like a physical blow. The consequences of my actions were real, affecting not just Alexis, but innocent employees, and most painfully, my son. I'm sorry for how this has affected you, Ryan. I reached for his hand, relieved when he didn't pull away. But I'm not sorry for standing up for myself, not anymore. He nodded slowly. I think I'm starting to understand that. I just wish... He trailed off again, unable or unwilling to articulate what he wished. That I had confronted Alexis privately? That I had continued to tolerate her cruelty? That cancer hadn't forced this reckoning between us? There were too many possibilities, none of them leading back to the comfortable denial we'd all been living in. I can't stay long, Ryan said, glancing at the door. The nurse only gave me 15 minutes. Will you come tomorrow? When they discharge me? He hesitated, conflict evident on his face. I don't know if I can, Mom. Things with Alexis are so volatile right now. She feels betrayed, humiliated. She's talking about moving back to Chicago, starting over there. The thought of Ryan leaving, moving hundreds of miles away just when I needed family support most, sent a cold wave of fear through me. But I refused to use my cancer as emotional leverage. That would make me no better than Alexis claimed I was. I understand, I said again, though the words tasted bitter. You need to do what's right for your marriage. Ryan stood, leaning down to kiss my forehead gently. Get some rest. I'll call tomorrow, even if I can't be here in person. After he left, I lay awake in the darkened room, the hospital's nocturnal sounds a muted backdrop to my racing thoughts. The surgery had removed the cancer from my breast, but the emotional cancer that had been growing in my family for years, the resentments, the enabling, the silent acquiescence to mistreatment, that would require a different kind of excision. And like my physical recovery, the healing would be painful, the outcome uncertain. But as I finally drifted back to sleep, one thought provided comfort. Whatever came next, I would face it on my own terms, with dignity intact and voice unsilenced. Cancer might take parts of my body, might even eventually take my life, but it had given me back myself. And that, I realized, was a trade I could live with. 6 weeks had passed since my surgery. Spring had fully arrived in Michigan, the library gardens bursting with tulips and daffodils planted by volunteers years ago. I sat on a bench near the entrance, taking a moment to absorb the sunshine before my afternoon shift. These moments of peace had become precious in the chaos my life had become. The pathology report had confirmed what Dr. Patel suspected: clean margins, no lymph node involvement. Still, the oncology team recommended a course of chemotherapy as a preventative measure. I'd completed 2 treatments so far, each leaving me nauseated and exhausted for days afterward. The third was scheduled for tomorrow. My hair had started falling out in clumps last week. Rather than watch it disappear gradually, I'd asked Dot to shave my head. She'd turned it into an impromptu ceremony, complete with champagne and ridiculous headscarves she'd ordered online. Cancer takes things from you, she'd said as she wielded the clippers. But it doesn't get to take your dignity or your sense of humor. Today I wore a simple navy blue scarf that matched my cardigan, my concession to conventional appearance even as my body rebelled against normalcy. The door to the library opened, and Linda Hawkins emerged, smiling when she spotted me. Since the gala, Linda had become an unexpected ally, stopping by regularly with casseroles or just to sit with me during the worst days after chemo. Thought I'd find you here, she said, settling beside me on the bench. Soaking up vitamin D before your shift? I nodded, tilting my face toward the sun. Doctor's orders, though I suspect Dr. Patel prescribed sunshine for the spirit as much as for the body. Linda handed me a folder she'd been carrying. The final numbers from the fundraiser. I thought you'd want to see them. I opened it, scanning the summary page with growing amazement. The cancer support initiative I'd announced at the gala, the one I'd created partly out of spite to redirect the funds withdrawn from Alexis, had taken on a life of its own. Linda and the chamber had organized a community fundraiser 3 weeks ago, raising additional money for what they were now calling the Francis Murphy Patient Support Fund. $75,000, I murmured, scarcely believing the figure. That's incredible. People respect you, Fran. When you shared what happened with Alexis, it struck a chord. So many people have watched loved ones battle cancer only to be dismissed or minimized by others who don't understand. The irony wasn't lost on me. My moment of righteous anger, my public humiliation of Alexis, had somehow transformed into something genuinely beneficial for the community. The fund would help cancer patients with transportation to appointments, meal delivery during treatment, housekeeping services, and other practical support that insurance rarely covered. We've already approved assistance for 12 patients, Linda continued, including Mrs. Rodriguez from your Tuesday book club. Her daughter was trying to drive her to appointments in Detroit while working full-time and caring for 3 children. Now we're covering a medical transport service twice weekly. Tears pricked at my eyes, a common occurrence these days, partly from the emotion stirred by such generosity, partly from the chemical chaos of chemotherapy. I blinked them away, unwilling to indulge in public sentiment. Thank you for making this happen, Linda. She shook her head firmly. You made it happen, Fran. All I did was provide the logistical support. As Linda left, I remained on the bench a few minutes longer, contemplating how drastically my life had changed in 2 months. The cancer diagnosis, the confrontation with Alexis, the surgery, the beginning of chemotherapy, each event a seismic shift in my carefully ordered existence. Yet here I was, still standing, or sitting at the moment, perhaps stronger in the broken places. My phone vibrated in my pocket, a text from Ryan. Our communication had been sporadic and strained since the night he'd visited me in the hospital. He'd called the next day as promised, but hadn't been able to come for my discharge. In the weeks since, we'd exchanged brief messages, each carefully neutral, skirting the deeper issues between us. Just checking in. How are you feeling today? A simple question with a complicated answer. Physically, I was managing the side effects of treatment as best I could. Emotionally, the landscape was more complex. Pride in my newfound assertiveness mixed with guilt over the collateral damage to Ryan, grief for the easy relationship we once shared, anxiety about an uncertain future. Good day so far, I replied, keeping it simple. Working at the library this afternoon, chemo tomorrow. How are you? 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again as he composed his response. Finally, okay. House closing next week. Found a smaller place to rent near the college. They'd sold the house then. The knowledge settled heavily in my chest. Despite everything, I hadn't wanted Ryan to lose his home. But choices had consequences. Mine and Alexis's both. Is Alexis still planning to move to Chicago? I asked, addressing the elephant that had been looming in our text exchanges. Another long pause. She left yesterday, taking a position with her old firm there. The words stunned me. I'd known their marriage was strained, had even suspected a separation might be coming, but the finality of her departure was unexpected. I started to type, I'm sorry, then deleted it. Was I sorry? The woman who had mocked my cancer, who had systematically tried to diminish me in my son's eyes for years, was now out of his life. Part of me, a part I wasn't entirely proud of, felt vindicated, but the cost had been so high. Ryan's marriage, his home, his stability, all collateral damage in the war between his mother and his wife. Are you okay? I finally responded, settling on concern for him rather than judgment about the situation. Not really, but I will be. Can we talk later? In person? My heart leapt at the prospect of a real conversation after weeks of careful distance. Of course, I'm free this evening after 7. I'll bring dinner. I slipped my phone back into my pocket, a cautious hope blooming. Whatever happened with Ryan tonight, at least we would be talking, really talking, not exchanging careful texts designed to avoid all significant topics. My shift at the library passed quickly, filled with the usual tasks that had structured my days for decades, helping patrons find resources, organizing the new release display, conferring with the children's librarian about summer reading program plans. The routine was comforting, a reminder that some parts of my life remained unchanged despite the upheaval in others. My colleagues treated me with a careful kindness that occasionally bordered on pity, especially on days when the effects of chemotherapy were more visible. Today, though, was a good day. My energy levels were relatively high, the nausea minimal. I even managed to help reorganize a section of reference materials without needing to sit down halfway through. By closing time, fatigue was creeping in, but the anticipation of Ryan's visit kept me going. I drove home carefully, another adjustment, as chemotherapy had affected my concentration and reaction times, making driving more challenging than it once was. At home, I took time to rest before Ryan's arrival, lying on my couch with a light blanket despite the spring warmth outside. One of chemo's stranger side effects was how it had altered my perception of temperature, leaving me perpetually chilled even on mild days. The doorbell rang at precisely 7 p.m. Ryan had always been punctual, a trait he'd inherited from Henry. I wrapped a fresh scarf around my head, a gesture more for Ryan's comfort than my own, and went to answer the door. He stood on the porch holding a large paper bag from my favorite Italian restaurant, his expression a mixture of determination and uncertainty. The sight of him sent a wave of longing through me, not just for our recent estrangement to end, but for the simpler days when he was young and I could solve his problems with a Band-Aid and a cookie. "Hi, Mom." He hesitated, then stepped forward to hug me carefully, as if afraid I might break. Perhaps I looked more fragile than I realized. "It's good to see you," I said, meaning it more than he could know. We moved to the kitchen, falling into old patterns as he unpacked the food and I gathered plates and utensils. For a few minutes, we made small talk. About the weather, about my job, about his classes at the college where he taught history. Safe topics that required no emotional heavy lifting. It wasn't until we were seated at the table that Ryan finally broached the subject we'd been avoiding. Alexis filed for divorce last week. Though I'd suspected as much after his text about her move to Chicago, the confirmation still surprised me. "I'm sorry, Ryan." This time, I meant it. Whatever my feelings about Alexis, I had never wanted my son to experience the pain of a failed marriage. He pushed pasta around his plate without eating. "It's been coming for a while. Your confrontation at the gala just accelerated things." The implied accusation stung, but I didn't argue. There was truth in what he said, even if it wasn't the whole truth. "We've been growing apart for years," he continued. "I just didn't want to see it. Or maybe I didn't want to admit I'd made a mistake marrying her." "Marriage is complicated," I offered. "Sometimes there are no mistakes, just people who change in different directions." Ryan finally looked up from his plate. "She was always hard on you. I knew it, and I let it happen because it was easier than confronting her. I'm ashamed of that now." His admission loosened something tight in my chest. "We both made mistakes, Ryan. I should have spoken up years ago instead of letting resentment build until it exploded." "Maybe, but what she said about your cancer was inexcusable. I should have called her out immediately." We ate in silence for a few minutes, each processing the acknowledgments that had finally been spoken aloud. The pasta was good, but I managed only a few bites before the persistent low-grade nausea of chemotherapy reasserted itself. Ryan noticed. "Not hungry?" "Side effect," I explained, pushing my plate away. "Everything tastes slightly metallic these days." His expression clouded with concern. "How bad is it? The treatment, I mean." "You always say you're managing when I text, but that doesn't tell me much." For the first time in weeks, I gave him the unvarnished truth. "It's brutal. Some days I can barely get out of bed. I'm nauseated most of the time. Everything hurts. I'm losing feeling in my fingers and toes from the neuropathy. And I'm so tired, Ryan. Bone-deep tired." He reached across the table and took my hand, his eyes filled with the empathy I'd always valued in him. "I should have been here. I'm sorry I wasn't." "You're here now," I said, squeezing his fingers. "That's what matters." Later we moved to the living room with cups of ginger tea, my new remedy for the constant queasiness. Ryan noticed the stack of library books on cancer survival and post-treatment wellness. "Always the librarian," he said with a small smile. "Researching your way through this." "Knowledge is power," I replied, the phrase a mantra throughout my career. "Especially when so much feels out of control." "Is that why you did it? The confrontation with Alexis, calling in the loan? To regain control when cancer was taking it away?" The question was insightful, cutting to the heart of motivations I hadn't fully examined myself. "Partly," I admitted. "But it was more than that. It was about refusing to be diminished any longer. By Alexis, by cancer, by my own reluctance to rock the boat." Ryan nodded slowly. "I understand that better now. I've been doing some research of my own." He gestured to the books. "Reading about the psychological impact of cancer diagnosis. about how it often becomes a clarifying moment that changes how people approach their lives. It certainly clarified things for me. I sipped my tea, letting the warmth soothe my throat. Life is too short and too precious to spend it appeasing people who don't value you. Like Alexis, I agreed. And I'm not sorry she's gone, Ryan. I can't pretend to be. But I am sorry for the pain her leaving has caused you. He leaned back against the couch cushions, looking suddenly very tired. The strangest part is that I feel relieved. Isn't that terrible? My marriage is over, and mostly I feel like I can breathe again. It's not terrible. It's honest. We talked for hours, really talked, in a way we hadn't in years. About his marriage and its slow disintegration. About my cancer and what the treatment road ahead looked like. About the house he'd lost and the small apartment he'd rented near campus. About the Francis Murphy Patient Support Fund and the good it was already doing. And finally, inevitably, about forgiveness. I want to be part of your cancer journey, Mom, Ryan said as the evening grew late. All of it. The appointments, the bad days after chemo, the recovery. I should have been there from the beginning. There's still time, I assured him. 4 more treatments to go. Plenty of opportunity for you to hold my hair back while I throw up, except I don't have any hair left. The joke was weak, but he smiled anyway. I'll be there, I promise. He hesitated. Can you forgive me? For not standing up for you all those years? I thought about Henry, about how he'd taught Ryan to avoid conflict, to keep the peace at all costs, about how I'd reinforced that lesson by my own silence until cancer had forced a reckoning. There's nothing to forgive. We're both learning, aren't we? How to speak our truths, even when it's difficult. As Ryan prepared to leave, he noticed the calendar on my refrigerator with tomorrow's chemotherapy appointment circled in red. What time? I'll drive you. 9 a.m. But you don't have to. I want to, he interrupted firmly. No more sitting on the sidelines. We're in this together now. After he left, I sat in my quiet house, processing the evening's revelations. The path forward with Ryan wouldn't be perfectly smooth. Too much had happened for that. But we had taken the first steps toward healing our relationship. Alexis was gone, their marriage over. My cancer treatment continued, with all its miseries and uncertainties. Yet somehow, improbably, I felt hopeful. The next morning dawned clear and cool, a perfect spring day. I was awake early, the pre-chemo anxiety making sleep impossible. By the time Ryan arrived at 8:30, I had been up for hours, alternating between restless pacing and sitting motionless, trying to center myself for the ordeal ahead. He took one look at my face and understood. Nervous? I nodded, not bothering to hide it. It doesn't get easier. If anything, it gets harder, knowing exactly what's coming. Ryan helped me to the car, his hand steady under my elbow, support offered without making me feel like an invalid. As we drove to the oncology center, he filled the silence with easy conversation about his students, campus politics, a book he was reading, normal topics that didn't revolve around cancer or divorce or financial disaster. In the treatment room, as the nurse inserted the IV that would deliver the chemicals designed to save my life while making me miserable, Ryan sat beside me, solid and present. He'd brought a stack of library books, titles I'd mentioned wanting to read, and offered to read aloud to pass the time. Just like when you were little, I said, remembering the countless bedtime stories we'd shared. Except now, I'm the one being read to. Everything comes full circle eventually, he replied, opening the first book. As the drugs began flowing into my veins, I closed my eyes and listened to my son's voice. The same voice that had once asked endless why questions as a curious child, that had cracked and wavered through adolescence, that had matured into the thoughtful tones of the man beside me now. Cancer had taken things from me, my energy, my hair, my sense of invulnerability. Alexis had taken things too, my son's attention, my self-confidence, years of family harmony. But sitting there, I realized how much remained. My dignity, my voice, my community of support, and now my relationship with Ryan, not perfect, but healing. 6 months later, I sat in Dr. Patel's office, receiving the news I'd been hoping for. No evidence of disease. The chemotherapy had worked. I would need regular monitoring, of course, and there were no guarantees cancer wouldn't return someday. But for now, I had won this battle. Ryan was with me for this appointment too, as he had been for every treatment, every follow-up, every difficult day of my recovery. Our relationship had strengthened through the shared crucible of my illness. He'd moved on from the divorce, focusing on his teaching career and gradually rebuilding his life. As for Alexis, she'd remained in Chicago, eventually remarrying. Her digital marketing career had recovered from the scandal, though she never returned to our community. Ryan maintained minimal contact with her, necessary only to finalize their divorce and divide their remaining assets. The Francis Murphy Patient Support Fund continued to grow, helping dozens of cancer patients navigate the practical challenges of treatment. What had begun as an act of revenge had evolved into a genuine community resource, one that would outlast both my cancer and the conflict that had inspired it. Walking out of Dr. Patel's office that day, with Ryan beside me and the Michigan autumn painting the trees in brilliant colors, I felt a profound sense of peace. Cancer had changed me, as had standing up to Alexis after years of submission. I was not the same woman who had received that initial diagnosis nearly a year ago, more worn in some ways, but stronger in others, more authentic, more willing to speak uncomfortable truths. My hair was growing back, curly where it had once been straight, a physical manifestation of how fundamentally I had been altered by this experience. Like the library gardens I loved, I had endured a harsh season only to emerge transformed, still recognizably myself, but different in ways both subtle and profound. Life would continue to bring challenges. Cancer might return, new conflicts might arise, aging would proceed with its inevitable limitations. But I would face whatever came with the knowledge that I had survived not only a disease that threatened my body, but also the silence that had threatened my spirit. And that, perhaps, was the greater victory. If you've been through something similar with a difficult in-law or family member, I'd love to hear your story in the comments below. Sometimes sharing our experiences helps others feel less alone. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel for more real-life stories about standing up for yourself and finding strength in difficult situations.